The first time the sun disappears, we have no idea it's gone. Because the sun's last light is 150 million kilometers away, it takes 8 minutes and 20 seconds for it to reach Earth. But when that time expires, there's an incredible amount of panic and fear among people. Imagine walking outside at 1 p.m. The sunlight has no reflections, so it doesn't show up on the moon at all. Since gravitational waves also emit at the speed of light, the sun's gravitational influence on our planet lasts about 8 minutes and 20 seconds. So as soon as we saw our sun disappear, we lost its gravitational pull, and the Earth jumped out of orbit and began to fly in a straight line. When the sun disappears, panic and fear spread throughout the world, and when we look up at the sky in these dark moments, there seems to be a limit to the speed of light, so for a short time, something seems to have happened. Jupiter, for example, continues to orbit a sun that no longer exists and project its light onto the Earth for another 30 minutes. A few hours later, with no sunlight left, the universe itself became the only visible source of light from space. Now the other stars in our galaxy are clearly visible against the black backdrop of the sky. But it's not enough to see the place clearly. We need to use electricity and fossil fuels for warming and enlightenment. Therefore, cities and towns continue to be illuminated by man-made resources just like a typical night. Think of a night that never comes up, that goes on all the time. And that it was a night that didn't end all over the world at the same time, and after 24 hours panic and chaos engulfed the whole world. Governments have virtually no control over this situation. The temperature is already decreasing by a few degrees everywhere. In the past, 99% of the world's natural productivity was done with photosynthesis, which requires the sun. But since there was no sun, the photosynthesis stopped almost completely. Plants can no longer breathe carbon dioxide. He can't get the oxygen out of life. That's not a problem. In total, we're all 7.5 billion people. We breathe about 2 trillion pounds of oxygen every year. Fortunately, our atmosphere is stored with $1 billion of oxygen through millions of years of photosynthesis in the past. So we have enough oxygen for thousands of years, including other animals and microorganisms that consume oxygen without photosynthesis. The average surface temperature on Earth was 14 degrees Celsius when there was a sun, and the average surface temperature of the Earth, which gradually began to lose heat without the sun, dropped to 0 degrees Celsius at the end of the first week. In the past, 0 degrees Celsius was always visible in winter. We're used to it. So if we don't care about panic, fear, looters and mayhem, we can live our lives in amazement in the first months without the sun. But by the end of the first year without the sun, the Earth's average surface temperature had declined to -73 degrees Celsius. The world's oceans are completely frozen, and ice is everywhere. Now most species of animals and plants have already disappeared. It generates heat on Earth and the temperature of its nucleus rises to 6,000 degrees Celsius. Geothermal sites such as Iceland have become a few safe havens for living life in the absence of the sun. Anyone who failed to move to a position in these zodiac signs of warmth, or to an underground bunker, where elite and rich people who warmed up with nuclear energy hid, 7 billion people froze to death in the first year of the sun's destruction. In these days, 10 to 20 years later, clouds at very low altitudes appear just above the surface of the Earth as the gases that make up the air intensify due to the cold. Oxygen often freezes and falls to the ground in the form of snow. 100 years after the first day the heart of the solar system stopped, the Earth's temperature has stabilized around -200 degrees Celsius. Oxygen lost its gas form, and the first generations of people who managed to take refuge went from the ground to the freezing cold in a special suit, shoveling some oxygen into their bags and taking them to their shelters. They then continued to breathe, putting the oxygen snow on the fire so they could breathe and heating it up. Liquid water at the bottom of the frozen oceans of the ice-balled world. Because the Earth's core is around 6,000 degrees Celsius, it is warmed by ventilation holes in the ocean floor and protected by miles of ice, a good insulator. There's water under the ice that's been around for millions of years. It's been a million years. And when there was the sun, the sunlight never got through. Organisms such as extremophiles living in the depths of the ocean were never affected and became food for oysters and tufworms by converting heat, methane and sulfur into the energy they needed. Not through photosynthesis but through chemical synthesis. For millions of years under the ice, even without us, the ecosystem continued. Creatures at the bottom of the ocean lived without even realizing that the sun was disappearing. Even without knowing the sun exists. It's amazing to know that life on Earth would be better off drifting through space without the sun. In this scenario, the Earth was a spaceship with enough geothermal heat for billions of years of life and carrying its passengers. It would fly deep into the universe in a straight line at a speed of about 108,000 kilometers per hour. It's a long journey that will travel 100,000 light years in just 1 billion years. It's a lonely, dark and cold journey through the Earth's Milky Way Galaxy, where thousands of stars can pass by and one of them can orbit.